So I start this Royal Rota with an apology that we're back in this studio and we're no longer in a beach in Fiji. It was good fun doing it in Fiji, and thank you for continuing to watch the Royal Rota. The Fiji edition on tour with the Sussexes was the most popular one we've done, 36,000 or so on YouTube and counting, so thank you for all of those who have tuned in to watch. Welcome back to the studio in London, and welcome to Robert Jobson, Royal Editor of the Evening Standard and author of some notoriety. Because this fine publication has just come out a few weeks ago in time for Prince Charles's 70th.
Charles at 70, yep. Thank you
so
very
welcome,
much.
Robert, and of course Lizzie Robinson, my producer and the hardest working royal producer in broadcasting, is here as well. So look, we could talk about the tour. We were all on it. We all came back crawling back with jet lag. But let's talk about this week, because I've when I put this out on Twitter and Facebook earlier, I called it the Prince Charles edition, because it feels a lot's happened in the last couple of weeks. We've had the interview that he won't be a meddling king. We've had your book. We've had birthday parties. A lot going on for him at the moment.
Yeah, a lot of people have been trying to suggest there's been some organised spin, putting him in a position. You know, are they now positioning him for kingship? Well, clearly that is happening to a degree, but I don't think it was necessarily can be seen as spin. I mean, a lot of the stuff I write in my book, I think, is revelatory, and some of the things that many people wouldn't want to necessarily come out. But I do think he's come across very, very well in John Bridcut's documentary on another channel.
I believe it was on a channel called the British Broadcasting Corporation.
But he came across very well, and I think he answered some of the questions, particularly the business about whether he'd be a meddling king and what the word meddling means. I thought that was all very relevant.
We had a screening, didn't we? Like a day before it happened, and actually you and me, Lizzie, were sat next to each other, and immediately we thought, bam, there is the point at which he's talking about the future, and he never normally does he?
No, and he was quite clear. He answered the question quite directly that he will not be a meddling king, and he said, I am not that stupid. So you couldn't be under any illusion how he feels that the job he does now and the job he will do are completely different.
But I do believe he'll continue in some of the things that he wants to do. Although the key that he said in that interview was, all right, what is meddling? So you've got a big question.
He called it motivating, didn't he?
Motivating.
I call it motivating, not meddling.
He's certainly going to be having detailed conversations in private with the Prime Minister once a week, which I think will be forceful. But he also said, what about
they're sending all those letters, all those spider letters to ministers, because he gets to talk to the Prime Minister face to face.
Quite right. And also the other thing I think was interesting, he said, about when it was being talked about convening power, and he said, well, if I will do these things if I get the permission of the ministers. And he will be pushing those ministers to the nth degree to get things done. I don't believe you're going to get 1 minute a vocal Prince of Wales and then a silent king.
And then he's not going to change his mind on the environment, on traditional crafts, on architecture, on all those things, organic
But these
farming.
aren't partisan issues, aren't they? They're not constitutional crisis issues. If you're going in and saying, like, I believe totally in this policy by the Labour Party, and then you have a Tory government, then you have a problem, because that is a partisan king.
Which is, I mean, Lizzie, did you watch that documentary? No, sorry, it was a drama that was called King Charles III, and it was all about him interfering in the political process. And I think many people, until that interview last week, many people thought that actually that might be the King Charles that we'll get, and he's tried to sort of draw a line under that.
Yeah, he talked about how he realises there's only room for one sovereign at a time, and how he is the Prince of Wales and heir to the throne, and how those roles are different. So,
it was explained to me recently that it's almost like if you're going from being a member of the orchestra to going to be the conductor, you do those jobs differently. You don't do it in the same way. And that's a point that he said a few times, wasn't it? It's a different job. I won't do it in the same way that I've done the Prince of Wales job. The trouble is he's just been Prince of Wales for so long.
But I think actually in the last 2 years we've seen a transition in the type of Prince of Wales he has been, because on those visits abroad, when we were in the Gulf states and Bahrain, and he was treated very much. They were bowing to him. Other members of the royal family were not bowing to him. It was clear that this was a state visit. And I think some of the remarks that he's made, apart from issues of the sustainability and plastics, have been very carefully crafted. And I don't think you've seen any of the outbursts and rants that you used to see years and years ago on architecture and issues like that. He's actually been, I think, very careful in what he's been saying. Because we've got like two kings a quasi-king at the same time.
Yeah, you describe him in the book as a shadow king because obviously the Queen doesn't travel anymore. She hasn't since 2015 when she went to Malta. I mean, so he does represent her when he's abroad.
We should point out that other books on Prince Charles are available, but
are they?
But in this particular book,
they're all very good.
As Lizzie says, you call him shadow king. You say when he goes on visits abroad, and we travel with him, don't we? They're like state visits because the Queen no longer travels abroad.
Absolutely.
He's the most senior member of the monarchy that's going.
They are effectively state visits, and quite rightly. Otherwise, that is the problem. If you've got a head of state that can't do the job completely, that is where you have the issues that. Nobody's criticising the Queen at 92, nearly 93 for not doing these things, but that's why she has the royal train so she can carry on visits in the UK. But in my opinion, he's not anything to do with power or power sharing. It's to do with responsibility, and that is what the Prince of Wales has, I think, risen to, certainly in the last 2 or 3 years.
Lizzie, did you think, as I thought when I watched that documentary, an hour long, and obviously a lot of access was granted in various places, the Caribbean and Vanuatu, as well as trips around the UK and Dumfries House, and we can talk about Dumfries House in a minute. Did you think it really caught the Prince Charles that we see on tour, the one who does interact with people very well?
So interestingly, Camilla said in the documentary she would like a lot of people to see the lighter side of Prince Charles, and I think that was the thing the documentary did get across, is that when we see him out and about, he is very good with people, he's very funny, he's very warm, and sometimes that doesn't translate to the kind of 2-minute news reports we put together. And in the documentary, across an hour, I think you did see the Prince Charles that we see day to day.
Or even when we, on the newspaper side, you invariably see a whole load of funny photographs of him pulling funny faces.
Or dressed up in a grass skirt.
And it doesn't reflect on the whole trip or what's been going on. I mean, that even for me, I don't know how long I've been covering this beat, but a long time.
How long have you been covering the Royal?
29 years.
29
years. Is that nearly 30? 3 decades?
But the point of it is
it's a joke we'll have to tell you about later.
I was surprised myself when covering up close and personal on some trips when I was the only reporter on them, that exactly what he does and how much time and effort he puts in, and you actually begin to learn more about what he's trying to achieve. And that, I think, when writing the book, was something that I was surprised at.
He makes me feel tired when you go on tours with him, and I'm not 70 yet. I might look it, but I'm not 70 yet. And actually, you just wonder. I mean, the ability that he's got to keep going, to keep putting that effort in. A lot of people say, when you look on social media, and then they did as well about Harry and Meghan's recent tour, it's a holiday. I mean, we all know It's not a holiday. It's nothing of the sort. And actually, people's holidays are interacting with other politicians and supporting charities and promoting fundraising. Fine, but most people's holidays are not that. But I mean, he makes me feel tired, and yet he's the one who's 70 years old. His wife is a year older at 71. And they go at this thing at a phenomenal rate, don't they?
They do. I mean, but they pace the Duchess of Cornwall's visits and engagements quite rightly.
Well, she came home from Africa recently.
Yeah, she does. She tends to do a lot less in terms of engagement. There's no criticism of her. But the Prince of Wales believes he hasn't got an awful lot of time. He hasn't. Whenever you talk to him, he says, I haven't got enough time. So he just wants to pack in as much as he can to get as much as he can done.
Yeah, but he's had time, though. I mean, he's been Prince of Wales since 1969. He's been heir to the throne since 1952. And
he's achieved a lot. He's achieved a lot in that time. But I just get the impression that he wants to do as much as he can whilst he has this role, where he has that degree of freedom as Prince of Wales, and he knows there will be limitations in his role as his role as king, and probably that's what he's talking about: packing it in, getting as much done as possible.
And I'll come in a minute to actually some of the stuff that you've written in the book about regency, potential regency, the first one since George III's time and all the rest of it. So 1810, we've looked that one up. But let's quickly talk about this week. So yesterday there was a party for him. 70 other 70-year-olds came to the party. We got a chance to throw a couple of questions at him. Some other members of our Royal Rota press corps, not us in this room, but handed over a bottle of bird feed that doesn't attract squirrels, because we were reading in his Country Life magazine how much he hates grey squirrels and loves red squirrels.
Yes.
And so, I mean, yes, they had a busy day, and then it ended with a party put on by Mummy, a birthday party by Mummy at age 70, in which she gave a very lovely tribute.
Very lovely tribute. I brought it in, actually. She said lots of lovely words about him, including the fact that he is a champion of conservation, the arts, a great charitable leader, and a dedicated and respected heir to the throne to stand comparison with any in history.
To stand comparison
Just
with
nick
any
that from the last page of this book. And it was a great tribute.
And that is the point, isn't it? The longest serving Prince of Wales in history, the longest serving heir to the throne, someone who has done this job for a phenomenally long time. But I suppose my point is that that's both an advantage and a disadvantage for him. He's been doing it for so long that it's, that there are some negatives in that as well as politics. He has a lot of experience, but also, he still hasn't got that level of popularity that Harry and William have got, or the respect necessarily that the Queen has got.
He's always sort of been caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. One of his expressions he's used, that he uses. The fact is, before, when he was Prince of Wales married to Diana, it was all about Diana. Now he's the Prince of Wales. He's the heir. He's not the monarch. So he's compared not favourably to the Queen. And now his children are grown up and they're more popular than him. So he's now less popular than his sons. I think, to be honest with you, when you look, I think it's probably best to just look at what he does. I don't think he bothers too much about polls. In fact, he said that to me. He says, if I'm in it for the long term. The reality is, if you're worried about polls, you're worried about his popularity. Then he'd probably go mad by now, yeah.
Well, that is a difference. I mean, some people say whether you're in favour of a monarchy or you want us to have an elected head of state, but those who articulate the view of the monarchy say that, well, they're in it for the long term. There is no opinion polls. There's no 5-year electoral cycle. They're here for the long term, and that's what gives a country stability in what are right now very uncertain political times.
Well, all around the world, there's a lack of statesmen, and actually, I think that when we see what's been going on with elected politicians from Trump to what's happening in China, where we've now got a Chinese emperor, effectively, who's been voted in for life. The reality is people like the Prince of Wales or Her Majesty the Queen have a great standing in terms of respect. And although they're not political figures as such, they have made a huge impact upon people's lives. And I think the good thing that is about having a monarchical system is that they act as a buffer zone between extremist politicians. And I think, that if you've got a prime minister that has to explain himself or herself to the head of state once a week, and that in itself is quite a good thing. I mean, if Mr. Trump had to explain himself to someone other than Melania once a week, it would be helpful.
And Lizzie, just before they went into that party with the 70 other 70-year-olds, not only did we find someone who was born on exactly the same day as Prince Charles, and thanks to him for Tony, wasn't it?
Tony.
From Newton Abbott. Thank you, Tony, from Newton Abbott, for talking to us. But also, it was quite interesting how the Duchess of Cornwall, Camilla, said he's not going to slow down, because we said, it's 70 now, so you're going to slow down.
And
what did he say?
He said, you may slowly but surely see him slow down, and she sort of quipped, I doubt it. And
I like the fact she sort of peeped from behind him and said, I doubt it.
I think he probably will have to, though, because he works very, very long hours, and there are people that are close to him who say that he does. I know that Harry mentioned it as well, but he often he's falling asleep at his desk. There comes a point when actually you do have to.
What did Harry say in that documentary? He said he falls asleep on the desk and wakes up with sort of the papers stuck to his forehead or something.
Well, he does something like 14 hours a day, 600 engagements across the year. That's a really busy schedule for a 70-year-old.
He packs them in, doesn't he? When we're on those trips abroad, I mean, I covered a lot of the trips on my own.
How many years have you been doing it?
Oh, a lot of times. But this particular trip to Australia, he had like 16 engagements in one dozen, and I thought, well, I can't carry on. I did every engagement with him. I said, I'm going to do a day with Camilla, and we ended up in I think it was a wine vineyard somewhere, and having a glass of wine. And I just felt that was great.
Yeah.
We're on that point, actually, because I asked for some questions on Twitter earlier, and actually some of them said, and this is partly related to what you were saying when Prince Charles went to Australia. Was it earlier this year? Or
for the Commonwealth.
Earlier this year, that's right. And also, we just had more recently Harry and Meghan's visit there. That the polls about a republic versus monarchy in Australia have slightly shifted.
Not quite a lot.
And, what did a few years ago, Prince George was called the Republican slayer, and now they say that support for a republic is at its lowest level for many years at 40%. And support against a republic, that's how they phrase it out there, is at 48.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke when the Prince was at a reception. I said
that's from Naomi on Twitter. Sorry,
I said that exactly that. That I think it's an 18-year high for supporting the monarchy in Australia, and that's when I stupidly mentioned it to the Prince of Wales, and he looked at me as if I was an alien. So what difference does that make?
Yeah.
You know, I'm in it for the long term. It doesn't make any difference to me.
When we were in Australia,
but it does make a difference. I think.
If there is a change of government next spring, I think it is in Australia, then the Labour Party in Australia has promised to hold
Well, as the previous Foreign Secretary, Julia Bishop of Australia, said, Bill says a lot of things. We'll see what happens. I mean, they've had five. I think it was 4 prime ministers in about 4 years.
Well, exactly. I was when we were in Australia, trying to go through how many.
Trying to work out who is the prime minister is the problem.
Exactly. Exactly. And can you explain this one to me? Another question on Twitter came from someone called Emily Nash. I believe she might work for Hello Magazine. Something about Potty Man. Ask him about Potty Man.
Well, actually, this is to do with Dumfries House. It will be clean. It was to do with Dumfries House. We were sitting up.
This is the estate in Ayrshire.
We're having a dinner up there, and we were shown around the estate earlier. All of us, I don't remember that. And part of that estate was the pictures. Was little statues made of pots. I don't know if you remember. And I took a picture of Max from CNN. Max I said, "Go and give him a cuddle," and it's all to do with the little picture of him and the Potty Man.
Well, if we can find that, is it on Twitter somewhere? So
I have it,
right.
and I'm holding it back. And I said, "No, go closer, give him a kiss." That was it.
Okay, right. This was in the organic garden. In
the organic garden, every house, yeah. And I raised.
So where children were pulling up carrots and things, you were busy taking pictures of Potty Men.
I did take a picture of Max and the Potty Man.
Listen, before we finish with matters to do with the Shadow King, as you refer to him, tell me about what you think will happen in terms of the future. We all know, and the Queen said very clearly on the occasion of her 21st birthday in South Africa, that she wouldn't abdicate. She was going to go on for as long as she were to live. If there's not going to be an abdication, you think there might be something else?
I do. I mean, I think that nobody expects the Queen to live as long as she did. Probably not herself. The fact of it is, she will never abdicate because that's her belief. But I do believe that there's enough, and so do others, that there's enough scope in the Regency Act that at 95, and I think that's an age that she's mentioned to people in her inner circle, that will be a time that it possibly be the right moment for the Prince of Wales to be made Prince Regent, to have the same executive powers as her, so that she can effectively do exactly what the Duke of Edinburgh has done and retire from public life.
King in all but name, so he would do the speech to
the have the same powers.
Houses of Parliament. It'd be like the cenotaph, as he's now done for 2 years, but on a massive scale.
Never happen. People said, "Oh, she'll always do that," but of course, Her Majesty is walking backwards is slightly the problem there, and the stairs. But the point of it is, also at 95. We don't expect High Court judges to be sitting in their position of responsibility at that time. Why would we expect a person who's the head of state? And everyone says, cites the Queen Mother, Her Majesty the Queen Mother, as she went on to 101. But the reality is the Queen Mother wasn't actually acting in any way in a capacity of heads of state. So I think at the moment, what happens is the Queen and the Prince of Wales meet very regularly. They have no aides in there at all, no courtiers. They discuss everything. He, unlike previous Princes of Wales, sees all of the government papers, everything.
So what you're saying is at the moment we've got a dual monarchy.
What I'm saying is,
how do you explain that?
And that's essentially that is what we do have. We've 2 captains on the ship. And although the Prince of Wales says you can only have 1 sovereign at a time, there clearly is a transition that is going on before our eyes, a seamless transition, probably because most of us alive today have not actually experienced another monarch. And I think that they obviously want to make sure that everything is smooth and it happens smoothly in that way. There's enough scope in a Regency Act. You don't have to be mad like George III or running off like James II.
That was the last time we had a Prince Regent, was at the time of George III having the sort of mental incapacitation.
And that's right. And then the Prince Regent, the Regency houses you see across London were built in that period, 1810 to 1820. He was effectively the king, Prince Regent. And I think that would probably...
If we were to have that possibly within 3 years?
I would say, I believe it will happen because I think that the Queen would also, at that stage, would never want anything in the monarchy to start to be seen as out of date or deteriorated. She'd want it to be seen as relevant, and in doing this, it would actually keep it relevant without her having to abdicate.
Okay, going from the very serious to the very sublime, one of the questions we had on Twitter was, does Prince Charles wear aftershave? I don't find out why we had this question, but I never get close enough to ever...
He always smells really nice.
So I think we'll leave that one open.
Yeah.
I think the answer to that one is
I'm sure it does.
Who knows?
There's a couple of questions linked to the tour, which I'll come to in a minute. But I mean, the tour was long, wasn't it? The Royal Tour, successful. I think most people would agree. You only did half of it, of course. We went all the way on to New Zealand and went right to the very end, did we not?
We did, right. All
we did 3 more
76
days.
engagements.
So we did the 4th country, unlike some people in this room.
3 days.
But the last time we did this particular programme, we were in Fiji. We were with Emily Andrews from The Sun, sat on not dissimilar bar stools to these, and a little table that we
Bit warmer, though.
made out of, I think we borrowed from someone's balcony.
Balcony table.
But we were, at that point, we're only halfway through the tour. So do you want to quickly recap on Tonga, quite the most bizarre place? Lizzie, I mean, tell us about the children. I mean, when you arrived there, they'd all been given 2 days off school.
Harry and Meghan and the travelling press went from the plane to the hotels. Children from across Tonga had been given the day off school, and they lined the entire route with flags, cheering.
10 miles or something,
it
wasn't
was
it?
amazing. Yeah, they were.
You couldn't mistake the colour of the Tongan
Yeah.
flag.
No, it was
red and white.
incredible,
It was incredible. Just the whole route was lined with these very excited children. So they definitely got a very warm welcome.
And they weren't in Tonga for that long. It was only literally a day.
Less than 24 hours, yeah.
Wasn't it? But I mean, they packed a fair bit in. There was some amazing dancing, and I was just, I don't know if any of you watched the documentary that we did on the tour.
I did. I thought it was excellent.
On ITV, and you don't have to say that just because I'm in this.
No, I did. No, I did.
But I was very excited
Do more
by
of them.
that dancing in Tonga. The school that he went to, Tupu College. I mean, the boys from that college were phenomenal.
It was
weren't they, in terms of their
incredible,
singing?
absolutely incredible. And we were there because they were unveiling another Queen's canopy where they were dedicating a forest to be preserved in Tonga. But they had this amazing performance, school children performing. They were just incredible.
Yeah, and actually one of the interesting things about that forest, because actually for this documentary we went back, did some more thorough research afterwards, and it was only 3% of Tonga is now covered in this like lowland tropical rainforest, and it used to cover most of the island, and therefore now you've got this Queen's Commonwealth canopy preserving that very small amount of forest, but at least it is now preserved. And actually everywhere Harry went, in every country, Australia, Fiji, Tonga, New Zealand,
and also when William and Kate were in Canada and the Prince was, they're doing it. This is obviously something that's going to happen continually, and thank goodness, because without it, what we're going to do? We've got a lot of these countries have taken out the rainforests, and they are the lungs of the world.
And anyone who doesn't know what the Queen's Commonwealth canopy is, you just have to refer back to the documentary, again on a channel called ITV, in which David Attenborough and the Queen, 2 nonagenarians born within, I think, was it 2 or 3 weeks of one another? I think it was in 1926. Spoke about the importance of creating these preserved forests around the world.
Crucial. But again, going to the Prince 30, 40 years ago was talking about the importance of rainforests. But at that time, the tabloids just to say, it was potty, talking to plants, and lost the plot.
Yeah.
The fact is, this is why it's quite good, I think, not to worry about polls and actually have a monarchical system, because, it's in it for the long term. It can see things for the long term and actually be controversial until it becomes the norm.
And I tweeted about one of his speeches that he made, I think it was back in 1970, when he was talking about the amount of plastic pollution, how we're using disposable plastic containers, single-use plastic containers, which suddenly is an issue in 2018.
There's an island in the Pacific, of plastic waste. I mean, it's just horrendous. And it is right for our kids and grandkids. It's frightening, it really is frightening.
And which is the point at which we ignore you and talk about New Zealand, because you weren't there to
I've been there a few times.
But what did you think of New Zealand? I mean, I thought, again, it was everything that, my first time there, beautiful, stunning, again, more forests, mental health. There was a lot going on in New Zealand, wasn't there?
There was, and she met the Jacinda Ardern as well, didn't she, who you spoke to?
Yes, actually, I thought, let's be politically neutral here, but I thought she was a very impressive human being, should we put it like that, as Prime Minister. Very refreshing, extremely normal compared to what we see here, or what I used to see in my old job. But Jacinda Ardern, I thought was a very normal.
And on our final day, we were in Roto and we saw the most incredible traditional Maori welcome ceremony, which
I've done
was
one of those
just
before. Amazing,
wasn't it? It was one of the
It's called
highlights of the tour.
Pauri, the whole welcome, isn't it?
Yeah.
You had to rub noses and everything at the beginning before you're allowed on the square or something.
We didn't, but they did do. They did the hongi.
And the haka was
the haka.
Quite something, wasn't it? That I think of all the hakas we saw in New Zealand, because there was one at Government House in Wellington.
Yeah.
But this one in Rotorua, it was just
spectacular.
Stunning,
Yeah, it was one of the best
New
things.
Zealand is an incredible. I mean, the previous Prime Minister, John Key, another great guy. You know, they've always seemed to produce pretty amazing people in New Zealand. It's a fantastic country to go to. Pity I never went this time. You know.
Well, you could have joined us, but then you had to get back because apparently there was a book coming out. Have you written a book?
I have. Charles at 70, Thoughts, Hopes and Dreams.
How was some? Actually, there was a couple of controversial stories over the weekend, and we must touch on these as well. And again, unsourced. So let's just be clear. But about the run up to the royal wedding, not the second one, but the first one this year, and whether or not there was a little bit of discord between the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, as they now are, and Her Majesty.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote in the book that they were a little upset, a little bit fraught probably before the wedding, and I think there was the line what Meghan wants, what Meghan gets, that Harry's supposed to have said to a member of staff, and the Queen is said to have told them all to calm down, and then some stories developed later about that, which had nothing to do with me, but I just say that, obviously there are a lot of people seem to suggest that if you write anything or say anything that's derogatory about Meghan, that you're against her, which could be further than the truth, actually. A lot of the journalists really impressed by her and support her a lot.
And there was a lot of very positive press when
Massively,
we were away for 16
incredibly
days.
positive press for both Harry, who is the most popular member of the royal family, and his wife. And so I wanted to watch all this on Twitter, and I actually, it makes me laugh, which will probably get me a sort of a load of hate mail now. But the reality is, to suggest that any of the journalists have got an axe to grind against Meghan who cover the royal beat is complete and utter poppycock.
There was some criticism in some quarters about her decision to go to Fiji and Tonga despite the government advice, which is still there, which says don't go if you're pregnant because of the Zika virus. But we all know she went. And she went to both countries. I mean, we spoke about it in the last Royal Rota, but I mean,
I was surprised
just to recap,
that they did that. I mean, they obviously, what happened, but they decided to carry on with the tour.
But there were clearly moments where they were quite careful about things that they did, like the school we were talking about in Tonga. I was the pool for that job, and Harry went for a walk through the rainforest to meet some of the children involved in the project, and Meghan stayed outside the rainforest.
And the reason for that was because we think mosquitoes might...
Presumably,
but then, Harry going into the rainforest is not necessarily the wisest thing to do. She's pregnant. I know, I understand that, but I was surprised. They continued with.
Well, we did keep checking the government advice to see whether or not it had changed, but it was still there.
There's nothing. The journalists weren't saying anything or doing anything wrong about it. They were just reporting the facts.
But actually, it did lead to quite a funny moment when they did that. What's called the mosquito song at the college.
So I was already in the forest by this point, so I didn't actually see it, but I think you did, didn't you?
Yeah, it was amazing when they did that. I won't even attempt to do the.
No, do it. Oh, that one, yeah.
Actually, you can watch it in the documentary, the documentary which is still available on the ITV Hub.
I think what we'll do is we'll mac a picture of him at the back, dancing, doing his moves.
Yeah, so I think we were all obviously a little bit surprised, but but the tour overall, there was not a single negative, really, was there? I mean,
well, I suppose there was some people suggested there was negativity about the reporting over the fact that she left the market early. I couldn't see that other than that being a factual story.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's
right.
Bring it on. That's all I can say.
And there was one question from Josephine on Twitter. When do we think that Meghan's going to announce her patronages of her various charities? I still think it's towards the end of the year, if not the beginning next year.
I think beginning of next year, because she's got to, you've got to sort of be doing a lot of work behind the scenes to know which ones you want to work closely with anyway, I think. And and they're more careful not to go scattergun with this, as you saw with Kate. They very much want to pick causes that they really care about and want to get into, and I'm sure that is exactly what's happening at the moment. She's going through all the backgrounds.
So, I mean, I called this Royal Rota the Prince Charles edition, and therefore, should we sort of end where we started? Where do you think these last few weeks, not only the Africa tour, not only the BBC documentary, the party and all the rest of it yesterday, where do you think it's left Prince Charles?
I think in a very good position. We were talking to some people in that queue yesterday, and they all said sort of the last few weeks, particularly seeing that side of him in the documentary, that he came across really well and very positively. So I think the last few weeks have done good PR for him.
And having the boys talking about him and the way in which they did in that film as well.
And his wife Camilla, I think the whole family having...
Men, I can't stand it when we say boys. His sons.
The boys.
They're one's nearly 40.
Well, quite true, yes, with 3 children. So,
But the point with the Prince of Wales, I think, now is that people, when the Princess of Wales was alive, and it was always said that she was the star act.
Yeah.
You know, people never didn't bother even going on the rotas with him. They literally had no one covering it, and so I think at least now, when you cover a job with him, you get to hear what he says and see what he does, and in that respect, I think he's getting a fair crack of the whip.
And let's finish with that family portrait taken by Chris Jackson from Getty. Another great picture. He's actually taken quite a few, hasn't he? And maybe we'll get him in the seat next time.
The go-to snapper.
But that was quite. There was a formal one, but also the very relaxed one with George on Grandad's knee and Charlotte cuddled up to her. What do we call Camilla? Step grandmother, or I don't know, whatever.
But it's that warmer side
Camilla,
of him.
probably.
I think that warmer side of him again, to see the sort of more relaxed family man that he is.
I think it also showed that what the Prince of Wales, what the monarchy will be going forward.
Exactly what I thought. Royal family of the future.
This is the core focus. We're not going to. I believe by the time the Prince of Wales is king, we're not going to have this massive balcony of people that was almost going to collapse. There's so many people on it. It's going to be a core royal family, which will be more cost effective, and I do think that is important going forward. That people see they're getting value for money, and that there's not too much of an extended royal family.
So actually that picture really represents
the future royal family.
You don't have to think too hard to see, actually, there's King Charles III there and Prince William, Prince of Wales of the future in that.
Prince George as well. But key in that is that Prince Harry and Meghan, because of their popularity, I'll repeat again, popularity of Meghan, the journalists, the two of them are clearly part of that future plan.
Yes, even though he's far down the 6th in line to the throne, or if William can't have any more, he'll be bumped down to 7th. But Robert, it's been a pleasure having you in. I believe you might have written a book. We might have spoken about it. I believe you've been covering the royals for nearly 3 decades.
Nearly 3 decades, and hopefully it'll continue.
And it was a pleasure having you in and sharing your experience with us.
My pleasure.
And Lizzie, thank you very much indeed. So another Royal Rota in the bag, not quite as exotic as last time, not Fiji, of course, but hey, we were talking about some pretty good things here. So thank you very much for watching.